It is time to finally build that God Squad. Stay frosty and head to buymaddencoins.com for the cheapest, fastest, and most reliable MUT coins on the market. I'll even help you shave off a few bucks. Use code DIRECTOR at checkout for 20% off. Yo, what up, brothers? What's up? It's the Director. Madden Ultimate Team fans, Madden fans in general, we just got our stream from GMM talking about some of the finer details in Madden 21 that we should expect with the gameplay. So I decided to let's do a compressed version of what they talked about. You know, hit some of the highlights that I think are pretty big that I'm excited about coming into Madden 21. I think they did release a Gridiron Notes as well, which I'll go check that out, make another video probably tomorrow morning. You guys can check that out as well. But let's get into this video, guys. Before we get started, hit us up with a like and sub if you do enjoy this Madden content. The small amount of time you guys take to hit the like, sub, and bell notification helps me out a lot. Let's get into this video. All right, so going over some of the changes and stuff that are coming into Madden 21 gameplay-wise, they did mention some stuff about run fits, defensive gap improvements with your force defenders, hammer-filled players in pursuit. So just basically, you know, working around the space of your offense, defensive line, just making sure those gaps and stuff are addressed to some point, because we did see some, you know, faulty movements last year in Madden 20. So hopefully a lot of that stuff is improved. You know, it should help out with, you know, in pursuit angles, you know, against the run, for the run, a lot of different stuff on the offensive line and defensive line. So hopefully that does help just a little bit. We're yet to find out. So balancing in audibles and play flips. This is something that I'm actually super excited about. The biggest thing that I hate about competitive Madden, especially in Ultimate Team, is the repetitiveness of people using the same thing over and over and over, because that creates boredom every single head-to-head game. It just feels like you're playing the same thing over and over again. And so one of the things that they did address with this, which I'm very excited about, balancing audibles and play flips. So basically what they're saying, and I put little notes in for myself, you know, throughout the whole thing, too many flips, too many audibles equals a false start. Okay, so it gives you a bigger chance at, you know, performing a false start if you do that too many times. You see a lot of times in Madden 20, you know, a lot of people that, you know, abused the stretch plays on those run plays. You know, they just kind of kept flipping back and forth until they got, you know, a better matchup to the side of the line that they were running, and that's going to be no more. So if you decide to do that, if you decide to, you know, flip too many times, if you decide to audible too many times, you know, just like in real life, offensive linemen get a little bit confused. So we may see, you know, more false starts in Madden 21 than we've seen in any other game. So that's great. That's a great way to make sure people don't use the same repetitive stuff every single game, because I hate that. Tackling improvements. This is something that's kind of interesting. Now, I did write a note here saying reach. Okay, so this is part of the tackling, trust me. When you guys saw the last trailer, they did talk a lot about, you know, reaching for the pylon, reaching for the end zone, reaching for the first down. It turns out that that's actually not something that you activate yourself. Reaching is something that just kind of happens, and it's based on players and abilities and attributes. So that's kind of interesting. If you've got like a player that's got maybe more awareness, maybe more, you know, I don't know, they're going to actually reach for those first downs and stuff, which to me is kind of cool, but at the same time, that's making the player create a vulnerable circumstance for you without you controlling it. Because I have to imagine if you're reaching for the pylon, that's going to create a more vulnerable state for you, the ball carrier, for it to be swatted out or something. But I don't know, maybe since it is being automatically activated, they're only going to do it in situations where maybe you're not as vulnerable. I don't know, just kind of a wait and see thing. Then finally at the bottom, I did put user-friendly tackling. That's probably the best way to describe what they were talking about. You know, we saw a lot of pursuit angles, we saw a lot of, you know, guided missile tackles really whiff in Madden 20. So what they're basically saying is that maybe the hitbox is bigger, maybe the success rate is a little bit higher. I like to say, you know, in the last trailer that I saw, it felt like the momentum of the ball carrier was dead stopped a lot of the times, and that's something that I would honestly did want to see because of guys like Eric Dickerson. You know, when they fall forward for 4 or 5 yards every play, that sucks. If you can stop the momentum of a player, you know, with a certain kind of tackle, certain kind of angle, that's something I definitely want to see, because I don't want to see, you know, the same guys falling forward every single time trying to pick up a first down. So there's something interesting. Next up, we got zone drop coach adjustment. This one's kind of interesting. We'll take a second to explain what's going on here. Oftentimes, you notice that coverages are broken. Zone coverages absolutely broken. You see it every single year. Something emerges as the go-to play for the meta. This year being your corner routes. You want, for sure, especially with those rollout plays, if you wanted it for sure first down or chance at a touchdown, you're hitting those corner routes over almost every other play. So what they decided to do, instead of, adjusting the actual players themselves, the actual zones themselves, they gave us kind of like a custom, pathway or ability to adjust, how far the drop is in these different zones. So you see here the zone drop flats, the zone drop curl flats, and the zone drop hooks. Basically, you can adjust, their drop back distance from anywhere between 5 and 30 yards, which is really exciting. So if you, like in Madden 20, if you saw somebody hitting that curl route over and over and over, and your defender was too far down or too far high, you can adjust how much distance that they do drop back, trying to, hit that sweet spot where they can react on a corner route. Does that make sense? So kind of interesting to see what they decided to do there. How much is this going to be utilized? I don't know. I would suspect that a new meta may be born out of this coaching adjustment. Maybe cover 3 is, pretty decent on its own or whatever like that, like a curl flat. And then maybe some YouTuber, maybe me, comes out and says, hey, if you take, that curl flat and, you drop back only 15, 20 yards, 5 yards, whatever, you can use that over and over and over again. And there's very few plays that, can stop that. That's something that I'm a little bit worried about. But at the same time, it's a great way to stop meta plays from being born. It's a great way to stop things like those corner routes, maybe curl routes. We've seen that in the past BOP. I don't know, dude. That's kind of interesting to see. I'm excited to try it out myself to see if it isn't broken, but very interesting. You guys can see there again, between 5 and 30 yards. Very, very cool, actually. I like that. I'm interested to get my hands on that, and I think a lot of us will be able to get our hands on that, and I'm going to show you guys that at the end of the video. Some very exciting news about the beta coming up here in just a second. All right, so, the one big thing that Clint did mention, though, is that if you do decide to adjust your distance in your drops, it will turn off matching, and that is just kind of the give and take of using that feature. So just kind of interesting. Keep that in mind. Strategic players will have to make sure to pay attention to that. Next up is the QB and passing improvements. This is kind of interesting. I've left some notes for myself here. Throws out of sacks, basically last ditch. So basically what they're saying here is that in the past, in Madden 20, if you're trying to get a pass out and the pressure gets to you, they're going to hang on to the ball. It's not the worst strategy in the world in real life, NFL football, but at the same time, it really was unrealistic. If you've got momentum, in your throwing motion and you're almost there and somebody, tackles you, the likeliness of you, taking that ball back down into protection is not very likely. So what you would want to do is try and get that ball off anyway, especially if it's somewhere, towards the sideline. It would result mainly in a incomplete pass or something. But it also has its, again, the give and take, the consequence, the positive and negative consequence. If you can get that ball out, if the pressure gets there, if the contact happens as soon as the ball is, close to being released, then the accuracy is going to be a little bit better. But if you do get contacted maybe in mid-throw, it's going to definitely make that ball float a little bit. It's going to affect the accuracy of that, and it's going to put you in a vulnerable position for like picks and stuff like that. So I don't know, but I did put in the notes here, contact does affect accuracy, so that's just something to keep in mind. But I think as we get to play the game a little bit more, we'll get to see, what the risk factor is of starting a throw animation with pressure coming at you from, a certain distance. So I don't know. That's kind of interesting, something to pay attention to. I also put in here the deep accuracy. This is all going to come back to attributes and stuff too in the game. If you got a quarterback with really good deep throw, with really good throw under pressure, really good play action or something like that, it will help in that factor. But one thing he did mention was passes 40 plus yards, when pressure is felt, it speeds up the throwing animation. Okay, so just like in real football, if you see somebody coming after you and you're trying to get a deep pass off, you're going to want to make sure and hurry that thing up so you don't get contacted and it's going to throw off the entire play. You want to make sure to get that ball out. And it does come again with its negative consequence of making sure that the accuracy is there. It doesn't put you in a position for a pick, which is more likely with deep throws. But just something interesting that Clint did go over there as well. We'll speed up a little bit here. Defensive contained balancing. Basically what he was talking about here was unblocked contained rushers take wider and slower pursuits, which to me is a little bit interesting. They talked a lot about people spamming the contained blitzes and stuff like that, thinking that people would get more of an edge with that. Well, while that can be true against, scrambling quarterbacks, they want to have somewhat of a balance with the contain, making sure people only use it against, mobile quarterbacks and stuff like that. So what they decided to do was to take those contained blitzers, those contained rushers, and put them on a wider pursuit angle with actually slower speed as well. So that's interesting. It's going to make you want to, use contained blitzes a little bit more strategically, but I'm not quite sure I'm on board with that one. Next up was player personnel packaging. This one's kind of interesting. I think a lot of people, I'm not sure how many people are actually going to use this, but let's say, for instance, you guys see down here where it says twin tight end slot. Basically, that puts your tight ends in the slot positions over here, and it creates a different personnel look, right? So now you've got, the two tight ends, running back, two wide receivers. Basically, what they're talking about here is that if you come out with that package, now you can audible to different formations that use that same personnel package, and that's basically what they're talking about. So again, that kind of, you can put that into factor with any other personnel swaps, and that does include excuse me, that does include manual player, swaps and stuff like that. So that's something to keep an eye out for. Definitely interesting. Not quite sure how many people are actually going to use it, though. Next up is player fatigue and out of position ball carriers. This is basically to tone down those guys that like to take Tyreek Hill and run with him a bunch, out of Wildcat or something like that. If you're using a player out of position, they're likely going to get super fatigued and they're probably going to fumble. That's basically what they're talking about there. Ability improvements. This is something kind of interesting. They didn't get into great detail about it. Oh, this is interesting, actually, what they talk about here. So wide receiver route abilities and coverage, defender abilities. You guys saw those abilities in Madden Ultimate Team, especially where, those corner routes, elite corner specialist or whatever. Instead of using the actual route, they're actually going to be using the areas of the field. Let me see if that's what I put in my note here. Yeah, so abilities now tied to areas of the field. So for instance, your cloud flats, your hook curls and stuff like that. If it's thrown in those directions, in those areas of the field, that's where the abilities are going to come into factor. So that's just something interesting. It's going to be a little bit of a learning curve for some people, but at the same time, not being, tied to those routes is a little bit interesting. It's going to require people to rethink how they're putting their abilities together on their cards. And then pass lead abilities right here. I think all they said was basically a faster release instead of, overthrowing their targets, which is something we saw a lot with those pass lead elite abilities. And then finally back here, more news coming in Superstar X Factors in July. So that's what we're going to see. They talked a lot about new X Factors, a lot about new abilities and stuff like that. So interesting. We'll see how those goes. And they also talked a little bit about more balancing on those mechanics too. Now the run game, really quickly, the run game, the biggest thing to take a look at is the new controls, okay? And you'll see, behind me it says hurdle, dead leg, juke, and spin. They're putting all the evasive moves on the right stick, and they're going to keep all the power moves on the actual buttons on the right side, which is interesting. The one thing I don't really love, and that's going to be something that's going to take maybe a learning curve, is that you'll notice that the left trigger is no longer, the directional moves and stuff like that. It's a celebration. And the celebration, is now a dedicated button on your Xbox One controller. Like, it's literally the left trigger, one of the most accessible buttons on the controller. So that's interesting. Maybe they're trying to get us to rage a little bit more against each other, but I do like having all of the evasive moves or the elusive moves on the right stick because of the combos they talked about. You can now combo together, a hurdle, a dead leg, a juke, a spin, trying to get, some, it's kind of like Mortal Kombat, a little bit. If you get those combos just right, you can go take it to the house. So that's kind of interesting. What's the note I put in here? Special move dictated by rating. Okay, so the special moves that you used to see here on the left trigger is now dictated by rating. So instead of, using left trigger like you did before, the rating will dictate, how effective they are with their special moves. Next up, we got the pass rush mechanics. This is where I get a little bit excited. I know this video is a little bit long, but there's some good information in here, guys. Pass rush moves right here. So a couple things to take into account. Let me see if they have the new thing right here. So here are the new abilities. You can put the actual pass rush abilities are going to be on the right stick now. So you get the rip, the bull rush, the club, and swim. That's interesting. You still have the SWAT and the switch players on the B, and then you got the contain and the speed rush on the right trigger. But the biggest thing I did want to go over here was the meters and stuff that you'll see on different players. So let's actually go back to the pass rusher themselves first. So you see this tick right here. You see these like different levels right here. He's got what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's kind of the amount of times that he can use different, rush abilities in conjunction with each other. And every single time you use them, it kind of stacks on top, and it limits how many times you can use it per player. So let's say you use 2 or 3, in one play, you're only going to recover one of those every other down. So it kind of adds an extra layer of strategy strategy using these defensive ends, especially if you're going to decide to user them, which I'll get to in just a little bit. And to counter that, you'll take a look at these offensive linemen down here. They have these little ticks under them as well, and that's basically an individual offensive lineman remembering the different moves that, let's say, a Judon on the right side has been using the whole game. And if you continue to spam the same moves over and over, that offensive lineman's going to remember, and the success rate of that's going to be a lot lower, which is very interesting. And the big thing that I love that Clint talked about is that, like in real life football, you're going to want to switch things around. You know, let's say, for instance, on the right side, I think that's Derek Wolfe right there. He's been playing against, you know, that right tackle the whole entire game. I think that's Mitchell Schwartz. If you decide to switch things around, I think this is the Ravens, you know, you put Sue or somebody there, whoever they have on the other side there, you decide to switch your defensive ends. Now the remembering factor of that offensive tackle, he's not going to remember who the new guy is. I think the good example they used was Von Miller and Bradley Chubb. If you decide to, you know, come at the same guy with Von Miller over and over and over, eventually that offensive lineman is going to remember what Von Miller's been using to beat him. But if you decide to switch at the last second, you know, Bradley Chubb instead of Von Miller, they're going to have to, you know, they're not going to remember all this stuff because they haven't played against Bradley Chubb quite yet in the game, and that resets with every single game. It's kind of interesting. I like the angle that they're taking to make defensive end, you know, defensive pass rushers, you know, a usable thing outside of like your linebackers and safeties. So instead of, you know, using your linebackers and safeties all game, you might be incentivized to go down and use your defensive end every once in a while, depending on the situation you're at on the field at the time. So very, very interesting. Last couple of things to note here. The Gridiron notes did come out. I'm gonna go check those out here in just a minute. We'll make it a separate video if there's anything super, you know, crazy to go over on those. But the last thing to mention here is the closed beta. Now, I didn't make a closed beta earlier on in this video because I had a feeling something was coming, and I was absolutely right. The closed beta is coming very soon. It was supposed to come out today, but they said they pushed it out to a little bit of a further date, but it should be very soon. And what's very exciting is that Kralo did mention a link in a couple of videos ago, a couple of streams ago, saying, go sign up for this link. Trust me, you're going to thank me later. And what I thought, it was kind of like, you know, a raffle. You know, you're going to be entered into a raffle to maybe get a beta code. No, if you went and entered that code, it sounds like you're going to get the beta. It sounds like everybody that entered that code in that particular stream is going to get a beta code, which is super exciting. Yes, I did enter that. Very excited to get my hands on the game, see how I can contribute to making the gameplay a little bit better. I'm definitely going to go leave some notes and stuff like that. But any of you guys that decided to enter that code, however many days ago it was in the last couple of streams, you guys are going to get a beta code. They also mentioned something about if you have a lot of engagement in the game, if you put a lot of hours into Madden Ultimate Team, regs, franchise, whatever, that there's a chance that you're going to get a beta code as well. And then they're going to do the normal thing of giving out more beta codes on their social media platforms and stuff like that. I'll keep an eye out, see if we can get any, you know, in our hands to give away to you guys, but we'll have to wait and see. Well, guys, that's a lot of information to digest, I know, but it was a very long stream. I tried to compress it as best I could into this one little video. I hope it was very helpful to you guys. What do you guys think? Give me your feedback in the comment section below. I think there were some dubs in this gameplay reveal, you know, the deep dive, and I also think there was maybe some head scratchers that I'm not quite sure about yet. I really have to get my hands on the game. But for right now, just take that information, marinate on it, give me your first impressions, and together, as we, you know, continue to digest what we just heard, we can, you know, formulate a nice opinion on what we might see in the coming weeks with Madden 21. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been The Director. Hit that like and sub if you do enjoy these videos. We'll see you next time, and as always, stay frosty.